Hello. My name is Kári Tulinius. I am, I think, on a very basic level, like on the most basic level, I am a poet. And what I think that means, or at least what it means to me, is that I'm someone who plays with language, who turns language into an object of some kind. And I do write other things. I've written novels, I've written short stories and essays, but the thing that I would continue doing even if civilization collapsed and there was no way to record writing in a sort of meaningful, like in a sort of any kind of permanent way, I would continue to be a poet. I would continue to play with language and try to encode meaning in language in a way that is um, somehow I don't know if it's like, I guess, artistic in some way. Like I don't know what, because of course language is meaning. That's but the that sort of slightly weird other way of meaning that poetry has. Well, I interpret this question to be something that is somehow not just text in a sort of normal way, like like I'm not saying like, oh, what's my favorite poem or what's my favorite novel or such a way, but some kind of work that mm, explores the textuality or textness of work. And so the first two things that came to mind are, on the one hand, the the poems of Emily Dickinson, who handwrote everything and bound these little sort of books with her own poems, or sheafs. I forget, she had a name for them, bouquets. I forget exactly what it was. And she, in her lifetime, I think only four poems were published. So her entire corpus, from sort of, only exists in terms of like how she left it behind in these handwritten uh, forms and versions, and then people have then interpreted them in different ways for when they have been published. And like the late 19th century, early 20th century versions are very different from the mid 20th century versions from today's version. And so I think I find, and then of course people always go back to the handwritten originals, which have also all been scanned and you can read them online. And there's something very, and then when you look at the, even like for poems that I know very well by her, when I go back and read them in her own handwriting, there's like this other meaning sort of comes to the fore, that like some, like how she would like use her use her hand, as she was like, you can almost like see her hand moving, because all of us, you know I still think, it's still the case that everyone is taught how to write by hand. So it's kind of, it's very easy to kind of to feel almost sort of embodied in her poems when you read them, because you can trace them, sort of how she traced them. So that's sort of one thing that came to mind. Another poet that came to mind was E. E. Cummings, who and I've gone to the Houghton Library at Harvard, where his papers are, and you can see his original manuscripts, which are all, he did them all on typewriters, which is not something that everybody does these days. But I've written quite a lot on typewriters, so it's again that same thing where I can sort of see him sort of manipulating the typewriter as he's doing it, and then you get these sort of other meanings, because his typewritten originals, even though he had like very carefully worked with the the printers that were publishing the first editions of his books, um, the typewritten originals are slightly different. Yeah, I mean, I'm a city boy, born and bred, and I've spent almost most of my life living in cities. But I don't think nature doesn't end at the city's boundary. Um, Nature is within the cities as well, and we are nature. And a city is in part of nature because we natural human beings sort of create them. Um, but the so but at the same time, so like I pay attention to the nature in the city, but I've also spent time in Iceland, in rural Iceland, and in the rural Finland, and the U.S. and France and other places where I've lived. And so the and of course, as human beings, we are, as I was saying, we're of nature. So it feels very natural to me to draw on these observations and these feelings that come from being in nature and feeling yourself to be part of nature uh, when I am creating something, because it's just mm, very basic to who we are. And sort of a metaphor I sometimes use is that as I'm sort of walking around, I'm surrounded by culture and language and so on. It's a little bit like being inside a forest, and then the leaves and sort of plant matter fall from the trees and the plants to the forest floor, and then sort of they start rotting, and then these things start growing out of them.